What it was really about is I kind of derived the title from the show from how I was actually using the process to seek out subject matter for the paintings. And I was really not consciously aware of what I was doing, but when I started analyzing it a little more, it turns out I was really looking for things in my life or my past life that I could relate to, that had some sort of familiarity, some sort of guidance, that it was at a familiar place, something that was comfortable, something that was peaceful. And so a lot of the subject matter I picked were kind of things that struck me in my life as familiar. Yeah, and that's kind of how I would probably normally do a body of work. Is I really wouldn't think consciously about a title or even a theme for that matter. I think I would just sort of roll with whatever I was feeling intuitively about starting a body of work. And it would usually start with one piece and then work its way down the line. And the first piece is actually the blue VW bus that is in the show. That's actually the show card or the poster. So, and then that's sort of derived from there. And that piece just came from working, doing deliveries around town, doing some furniture deliveries, and noticing this bus rusty on the street, and something kind of struck me about it. I wasn't sure what. You know, like I said, it's all pretty subconscious. It's just sort of an intuitive feeling I get. So I snapped some photos of it for later down. That was maybe a couple years ago, actually. And that's sort of how I work. I will just kind of collect massive photos or sketches or other writings maybe, and just sort of review them in a sketchbook or lay them out on a table and just start processing them. And sometimes those subjects that I record don't really speak to me right away fully. You know, there's something about enough to where I snap a photo and go, there's something about that. I have to file that away. And then later on, after processing it, then I'll sort of pick up on what it was about it that I liked and then sort of roll with it. And with that particular piece, the bus was by itself, didn't have a cover or a shadow on it or anything like that. And I'd also been driving past on my way to work or on my way doing errands. I'd seen a lot of these suburban carports and the shadows they cast, and just being really into that. And I couldn't figure out, you know, what it was about it that really moved me about it. And seeing that VW bus, and then right after passing by a carport, then it sort of came together. It's like, oh, this is just a great, you know, summer scene that I, you know, remember from my past, and that's where it came from. It's kind of a combination of both for me. I'm a huge fan of looking at photography. I like to go visit a lot of galleries that have photo type, you know, themes going. Like Blue Sky was a good example. I like to walk there on my breaks and just kind of look at how people compose space. As far as when I take photography for my work, it's really just a medium to get to the painting. It's not so much like artistic composition at the time, because they sort of, in some ways, like with that VW bus, it sort of ends up being kind of a collage for a composition. So that particular bus combined with sort of the idea of the carport sort of melds together. So it's definitely, for me, I think overall, a tool to get to the painting, the end of the painting, just like drawing, just like sketching, just like taking a lot of notes and recording some inspirations, however that is. And so it's just one of many elements. But at the same time, I definitely appreciate the art of photography, and I'm a big fan of it, sort of from that standpoint. I appreciate photorealism painting like Chuck Close and Bechtel and, you know, the classic 70 photos realists. almost as much as I appreciate, abstract painting like Rothko and photography in that regards, all almost equally. But because I paint, it sort of comes out. Maybe I favor a little photorealism. I've never considered myself a photorealist painter, although things have become tighter and probably resemble photorealism more and more. But I think the method I work and the for lack of a better word, my lack of precision compared to your classic photorealism painters, or probably, if you start analyzing it, I'm not even in the same ballpark as some of those painters, because that's not my focus. It's really, it's really about keeping that intuitive feeling in and it's tricky because you're dealing with this very tight, very what seems to be a very meticulously executed painting that seems to be very analytical in its approach, but at the same time, I'm very much, the theme is just really holding on to that gut feeling on the day that I saw the bus or I saw the airplane that really struck me, and it's really trying to keep that intuitive kind of emotion, which I've never interpreted photorealism so much. In that regard, it's more about, executing a painting into almost something abstract, and that's how I've always viewed photorealism. It's sort of on the same level of abstraction as a minimalist in a lot of ways. Yes, it could just be titled Oregon Small Town for that matter, because it does have that, it isn't about so much specifically that corner and that street in Astoria, because that would have been easy, and that's what you kind of see photorealist paintings titled as, that specific spot, and you could go to that spot and recognize it. I think if you went to that spot in Astoria, it's probably pretty close to what you would see, but I took so many liberties, and that's a good example of why I'm probably not a photorealist is or however it's labeled. I take way more liberties than probably a photorealist painter would on average. I mean, with the bus, I flat out just made up most of that scenery. It was just sort of like, okay, this belongs here, and then it's about this, and it's more to support. Once again, it's more to support the concept of the intuitive sort of impression you got from when you first stumbled upon this particular spot. But that's a good point. Yeah. Early on in my early 30s, maybe late 20s, I was painting a lot of different kind of subjects. So I was really just trying to find myself. And I was very busy. So I was tackling portrait painting, figurative painting, interior spaces with the chairs that I was known for many years, and then starting to branch outside with more urban scenery and other landscapes. And as I continued to collect a body of work, large overall comprehensive body of work, and also at the same time living in Portland and being very active and looking at Oregon painters, I was sort of starting to come to the conclusion, when I saw the patterns of what I was drawn to and what I liked, I started to analyze, what is it that draws me to certain paintings? What is it that draws me to certain, and then specifically realism paintings or representational painting? What is it about it that strikes me? And one thing I was really drawn to is drama and stark light. And so I think it wasn't really like a moment that sort of gave me an aha, like, yeah, this is what I paint. I think it just kind of culminated over the years, and probably is very recently in the last few years where I really started to figure out this is who I am as a painter. I mean, it was more of, I wake up and I look back at my last couple of years, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I paint. And that's what I'm drawn to, and that seems to be what works for me. Also too, it's like, I appreciate Portland painting in general, but what my pattern is I see in it is it represents the climate of Portland. And I'm not generally drawn to what's around me I'm generally drawn to what I want to look at. And that's where it really comes down to. It's like, it boils down to my paintings are just compositions of things I want to sit and drink coffee and stare at for a couple hours at a time, which I'm notorious for that. I'll just kind of zone out and get catatonic and just, use the paintings almost as meditation type of balls, almost, where you contemplate things, and so I'm looking for scenes that I'd like, that I can just be in, and I felt like the Portland climate with the overcast skies and the the diffused light without shadows is something, that's something I see every day, and it's something I'm drawn to, and so. Doesn't really do a lot for me personally as a painter. I can definitely appreciate it. Like, I love to look at, for instance, Roll Hardy's work. It's something I'll never do, but that's why I like to look at it, because the paintings are in a style that he uses a lot of black, and he emphasizes a lot of the climate in Oregon. And I'm a big fan of Roll's, but as a painter, I would never paint like that. Just like I probably wouldn't paint like Lucinda Parker or any more in the thicker kind of abstract vein. Yeah, it's absolutely true. When I first graduated PNCA, everybody seemed to be, when they graduated, seemed to either be going to grad school, or they totally just were giving up on art, and something like, I'm done with art school and that's it, I'm going to go in some other direction. Or they were going into teaching, and all three of those just didn't really sit with me very well. So my wife actually was a social worker, was working at a homeless shelter down in downtown Portland, and said, well, if you want something a little exciting to do, something different, you should go hang out at the homeless shelter, and you can even work there, and you'll have, if nothing, you'll have a lot of stories, and you'll have a lot of interesting, experiences. And so, yeah, I sort of took it on as sort of something different to do, because I didn't really want to follow in the same vein as all the, everybody that I graduated with. It seemed like that seemed to be a very, almost like, okay, this is your path, this is where you're going to go. And I just didn't feel like that was where I wanted to do. So I, out of the blue, started working in this homeless shelter, and it was insane. I mean, it was just a chaotic, loud, interesting environment. And the way, the energy levels are so intense. And they come in and it would just be, at this decibel level and this activity level and these drama levels, like beyond anything I was ever accustomed to. But for whatever reason, because all this energy was concentrated at once, around 10 o'clock, we shut the lights out and everybody would just go to sleep. It wasn't even like you could hear a pen drop. It was so quiet. And I think one day I was just like, enjoying this quiet stillness in the room. And I look in the corner and there's this old beat up office chair sitting in the spotlight. And it was just speaking all these stories to me. And because it was so quiet, I could see and I could hear everything it was telling me. And it was really weird. So sort of an epiphany for me, because it was like, was kind of an aha moment. Like, that's exactly what I want to talk about as a painter. That's exactly what I want to express. And really, that was like 20 some odd years ago, and I'm still chasing that concept. I don't know, I think some days I'm better at expressing it than others, but I knew even then it wasn't something, it was probably an unattainable goal, but it was worth chasing because of all the experiences on the way. It was going to be an interesting ride, and I'm still chasing, that kind of idea. That's a good question. So yeah, I started off with the chairs, and that's all I did was chairs and stark light and shadows, and at some point I moved on to the outdoors, and I started doing cars, and I started doing buildings. And I always wanted to tackle those subjects, but I wasn't feeling the same spirit that I was getting from the chairs. And I think what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a lot of personification, a lot of human characteristics in my subject. And that the chair is easy because it's almost an imprint of a figure. And so, and we are so focused on that interior, sort of design that, the chair's almost taken on a human quality. So it was kind of a teaching tool for me. And at some point I felt like I've said all I needed to say at some point, and then I moved on and I was doing the cars, and then I was doing the buildings. But doing that outdoor scenes actually taught me to be a much more well-rounded painter. And and I think I got a lot better and a lot more aware of what paint and what composing a space, the power that has. And so what I would do is I would feel that sort of growth that I did, and then I would go back to chairs and see how that feels and see what that is like. And sometimes I would feel growth, but lately I've been going back to chairs and I'm feeling like a completely different view of how I paint. So that's kind of why I jump back and forth. I'll kind of let things run the course, and I'll feel like, my skill level where I'm at pretty much maximizes the subject matter. So then I'll change it up and I'll do something else. And so now I'm having like about 4 or 5 subjects that I'm bouncing, back and forth to. And I'm learning new things from that subject and then going back to, something else. Maybe I'll go back to chairs, maybe it'll be Airstreams, and so then I'll try to add something different to that element. And kind of rotating around helps me, I think, just grow as a painter. And I think especially in the last 5-6 years, I feel like I've taken on a new growth that I didn't expect, because I'm, now I'm pushing 50 and maybe I've maxed out my potential, but I feel like I've opened up a new door where I continue to grow in my skills and my ability to express my ideas. And once again, it goes back to I'm chasing down that idea of that initial feeling I got from that chair in the spotlight, and about telling a story, and about dealing with formal elements, and also just dealing with just not even necessarily a story, just a intuitive feeling. Whether that's nostalgic, whether it's, sometimes people come into those paintings and feel sad and lonely. And I'm not necessarily trying to avoid that, because I personally view my compositions as positive. And that's sort of where it came from, because it was sort of this desired need for peace and quiet in an environment, and contrasted with this extreme, drama and loud and all those things that go with, large crowds. And so it keeps kind of always trying to get back to seeing how I can express that idea just a little more effectively. And I feel like rotating helps build that.